Man, how many times am I going to play a game as a bearded character voiced by Troy Baker wandering through the woods with a teenage girl who he's a father figure for? After a million years since that preview, then what feels like no time at all since that demo, we now finally have our hands on Avengers. Was it worth the wait? I like parts of it. I like that this is the first game I've ever gotten an early review code for, so I want to say thanks to Square Enix for spotting me a copy, and my good pal James Portis for helping me find a way to put in the request for it, using some of his own personal connections. He's an awesome guy and you should check out his streams. Even though I got this game for free, I still feel it's my responsibility to review it honestly and constructively, so I won't mince words about the parts I take issue with, but I'll be sure to highlight the things that I like. Because I feel like there's a good game in here, buried under all the, everything else. This is half a great game. Mentally preparing myself to be called a shill by the haters and called a hater by the shills. God forbid an opinion have nuance. After so long in development with no word on what the game would be, I feel like a lot of us started imagining something really brilliant and groundbreaking in our heads. But unfortunately, Avengers isn't that. It has little indications that somewhere down the line, maybe it could have been, but it's bogged down by all this open-world, microtransaction monetized, tedious character progression that'll go on forever, multiplayer-focused, bad multiplayer, generic objective, one-size-fits-all play style muck. There's some parts of it that I genuinely loved, but a lot of it is undermined by the live service elements that keep bleeding in. These are the VIP seats? I can't see shit from up here. These are the nosebleeds. I want to be in that front row. Oh, well, alright, that's cool, I guess. The basic combat is very button-mashy and reminds me of the olden days of superhero beat-em-ups. You got your light attack and your strong attack and your super moves, and everyone has a projectile. Just like Ultimate Alliance. Okay, I can dig it. Every character has their own unique set of animations, moves, and combos, but they all play the same way when you boil it down. A few days ago, I saw someone tweet a video of some Captain America gameplay where they were doing this sick combo with tons of variation, but then I realized, you don't have to do that. It doesn't offer any advantage over just hammering the light attack button, then mixing in some strong attack. The old square triangle. All of this doesn't build up a combo meter or do extra damage or really anything except look cool. I mean, it looks super cool. But I'd like if the game actually, incentivized you to do things like this for more than aesthetic purposes. The combat feels utilitarian, and maybe a little undercooked because it's missing that really satisfying edge, like the increased speed and agility Batman gets with a long combo, or the tons of varied ways you can take down opponents even quicker in Spider-Man if you mix and match your moves. Plus, in Spider-Man, fancier moves and long combos also gave you health, so you were really incentivized to not take damage and do the stylistic stuff. Both of those games had a really great sense of rhythm to the fighting that made it engaging. And it was easy to get into a pattern where you felt untouchable if you were skilled enough. Here, Avengers gives you this little yellow circle as an indication marker that you're about to be hit and should dodge. But oftentimes the camera angle obscures that because my character is always in front of the enemy. But when I miss it and get tagged, it doesn't really affect anything except doing a little damage. It doesn't break your momentum and force you to slow down. There is no momentum. The speed of the fight never increases beyond just mashing until the enemy falls down. The stun meter fills on individual enemies instead of on your end, so the game pushes you to focus on one guy at a time with a lot of sequential attacks. And it's really hard to do anything flashy when you're being ganged up on, because you'll typically get shot out of the air by one of the other enemies doing a move like this. The takedowns don't quite feel as rewarding because you can't do them on just anyone after building a really long combo. It has to be on a single enemy you've been focusing on. This makes it way harder to split your attention across multiple enemies, and you don't really want to go for the takedowns unless it's on one of the really weak robots. Ultimately, I don't mind the combat, nor do I think it's even bad. I just feel like it's not very satisfying compared to other superhero combat systems. Not bad, but could be way better. A cool feature is that every hero has their own special method of traversal, like Iron Man's flight, Ms. Marvel's stretchy parkour, Hulk's long jumps and climbing, and all the rest. These are cool in theory, but clunky in practice. Hulk's jumping and climbing is pretty slow and stilted, and doesn't feel as good and fluid as, Ultimate Destruction. Iron Man and Thor's flight feel really slow and limited. You can just get like minor upgrades for your max speed. I'm disappointed because Iron Man's whole gimmick is that he's piloting a skin-tight fighter jet, but you never really feel that fast when you're playing as him. There's also some other issues that extend to all characters, like I present this as clear evidence that QTEs are outdated and we should stop using them, because the options are something awkward like this, or this.
I'm going to die.
Maybe just start doing Heavy Rain or Telltale style ones, where if you fail it, the consequence isn't death or pausing. You just kind of trip and feel like a dork. I mean, 90% of this game's incentives are to look cool anyway, so why not? Oh, you can just put the hammer on the guy's chest and he's stuck. That's cute, I like that. This game has some issues with texture load-ins that sort of take you out of the moment during cutscenes. Feels like I'm playing Mass Effect again. The whole thing just doesn't feel as graphically polished as other stuff out there right now. There are times when this still looks and feels like a really high-end PS3 game. And I don't mind it all that much, but I feel like some extra care on the look of the game would have been really appreciated. Especially for the community who loves photo mode, art, and photography stuff. This whole game is pretty buggy and busted, even after that 15GB day one patch. It needs a lot more fine-tuning to iron some of these bugs out.
That doesn't look ready!
Like games taking 10 to 15 minutes to load, enemies becoming invincible, T-poses, levels disappearing, character animations bugging out during cutscenes, subtitles and audio disappearing during a cutscene with a major reveal in the game's story. I've heard this particular cutscene was broken for multiple people I know. Again, I recorded all of this after the patch. Speaking of Mass Effect, I like how everyone's got their own little room on the helicarrier that you can access as you gather up the team. Reminded me of building up the crew on the Normandy and then exploring their various personal spaces. There's also the mission select war table that reminds me of the galaxy map too. I wish this game was more like the good parts of Mass Effect, honestly. I'll tell you what no one online seemed to be saying a few weeks ago.
I love you, Victor.
But I didn't play that, so I didn't really have my perceptions colored by my experience with that. I had my perceptions colored by free early review code. Hell yeah, in Square Enix we trust. Sure, the game's combat felt a little repetitive and button mashy, but I was used to that from pretty much every older superhero game I've played. Not every combat system can be Batman, even though we went through that annoying phase for a few years where they certainly tried to be. It's enclosed and linear, but I don't mind. There's still just enough exploration for me, and really, all you end up finding is new rib cages for your high-pressure Dave and bracelets for your fangirl. Boss fight with Abomination was pretty fun. It was cool seeing him again because he hasn't really been in anything substantial in like 12 years once the movies were done with him. Alright, on to Mission 4! Oh no. Everything I've played up to this point was an extended 3-hour-long tutorial. This is the real game, isn't it?
Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened.
Oh, it seems so much like Destiny, the game that disappointed me in 2013 to the point of turning me into the cynical clone I am today. Well, at least I don't have to do repetitive tasks like killing endlessly spawning enemies while a monotone-voiced robot AI partner takes 10 minutes to open a door or something.
Protect the uplink.
Oh god.
I think I can upload the protocols to a secure server.
Oh god, please! In my initial run of the game, getting to this section felt like a punch in the gut. It just completely sucked away my excitement like a black hole of games as a service, and I turned it off and went to bed. From here on out, I started feeling the game less and less. It started getting way harder to play this game in single player because of the amount of high-level enemies they throw at you. You have these annoying sections where you have to stand in a circle for a certain amount of time while getting pelted with waves of robots, and you lose if you walk out of it for too long. And, yeah, that's like the majority of the gameplay here. That or smashing random sets of 3 or 4 objects in the environment. Rinse and repeat. The objectives are just so basic and repetitive and mindless. They all have to be built so you can do these objectives no matter which character you're playing as. But that inadvertently makes the characters you play as feel less special. Like, any of them can do the task, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. Same shit, different day.
Your differences are your greatest superpower.
There aren't missions where you'd have an easier time playing as Hulk over Iron Man or vice versa, so there's no strategy to who you play as or choose to be your companions. You don't build your team based on anyone's skills or strengths or stats or special moves, it just doesn't matter. Let me make it clear, I don't mean there should be objectives that you can only complete with a certain character or roster, because we all know how that would go. I just mean it would be nice if choosing one character over another felt like it would have an effect on something, so everyone on the team could get a sense that they had some special skill or something to add. Okay, so I don't particularly care for this gameplay model of walking around open world areas that aren't actually open world, they're just slightly larger linear areas, and then doing repetitive grinding tasks to progress the story. I knew from the get-go that the multiplayer and live service elements of the game would irritate me, so I tried my best to ignore all of that and just focus on the campaign, but it bleeds in and infects this portion of the game too. Nothing gets me less excited for a game's progression than two things: a screen that looks like this, or the accursed word gear being uttered. And yes, I know the first one is kind of silly because every game has a skill tree like this now, but I still see these and then get demoralized because I feel like the gameplay isn't going to be smooth and fun until I've unlocked the lion's share of all these by grinding for several dozen hours with half a combat system. Then my greatest fear is that once I've unlocked a decent amount of these and the combat feels more complete, I'll be in the last hour of the game so I won't get any time to appreciate it. Normally that's not true, but here, well, there's 3 pages of skill trees for every character, good god. It also doesn't help that these upgrades are so expensive and time consuming to unlock that you'll spend hours doing it for one character when you have another, 3, 4, 5 characters to do it for. When we say we want the campaign to be decently long to justify the $60 price point, we don't mean give us 8 hours of content but 40 hours of opportunities to grind. The worst part is, I would have been fine with an 8-hour campaign. Most games I like are pretty short anyways, and I have a social life, and jobs, and other interests. I don't really need to play a game for 80 hours to feel satisfied. And now I feel like I need to play it for that long to grind for gear and upgrades just to deal with the game's random difficulty spikes and the few hours of content it actually has. The light RPG elements like adding gear come into play here, like using certain gear to reduce damage from some attacks or increase damage on certain enemy types. That's all well and good, and I understand it, but again, I feel intimidated by just how much of it you get. The inventory fills up with all these various gauntlets and chess pieces so quickly that I get overwhelmed trying to manage all this. It takes some of the fun out of it when I have to sit down and read every single item description in the list, weigh their ranks and which ones I can afford to upgrade, check the locker for all the other stuff I picked up that didn't make it into the inventory, then make sure I've done that for all 4 types of gear per character, all just so I can play a level that lasts 15 minutes where I could have gotten through it anyway without thinking about any of this stuff. No matter how much I fiddled with the gear, it just didn't feel like it was having a big enough effect on the gameplay to justify how much I was micromanaging it. Some would argue that the single player stuff is muddled because the game's focus is multiplayer, so I figured I'd give that a fair shake too. I played it with a few friends who all have their own channels and are doing their own videos on this game. Go check them out because they're a bit lesser known but make some really good content. Me and the fellows played this game's multiplayer for 7 hours and all came to the same conclusion. It's worthless, doesn't feel any different from single player. Like, the only difference between this and single player is that it feels like your partner AI is improved and better at combat, because it's a person. But otherwise, it's all the same experience. One time I was doing a multiplayer challenge with friends and all of our reticules bugged out, so we had to complete the match without being able to aim properly when throwing projectiles.
Targeting system's knackered, boss.
Am I balling it?
Like, what's so groundbreaking and special about this? It's just 4 guys beating up infinite waves of robots. We had that shit figured out in 2006. Try something else? The characters feeling unspecial is even more apparent when you're doing things as a team, because the objectives are so basic and bland that it feels like busy work. Alright team, let's go in and just mindlessly fly towards the objective marker, smash the thing and fly towards the next objective marker, press the button and fly towards the next objective marker, go down the elevator and we won! That's it. It's a bad sign when the characters feel better implemented for co-op play in the LEGO games than this. Look, here's a big heavy object that only Hulk can lift. Here's a device only Iron Man can hack. Here's a spot where Black Widow's invisibility will help us infiltrate. Here's a spot where Cap's unbreakable shield will come in handy. Now these characters don't feel interchangeable, even though their parts may be. You have all these big open environments, but nothing to do in any of them except go to the objective marker and open the same 3 chests full of gear in the same few spots forever. Things get even more repetitive doing the combat challenges in the harm room. You have a big holographic danger room thing that could look like anything, but it only has one layout that never changes, and it's filled with endless waves of the same generic robots you've killed a million of. The enjoyment I got out of multiplayer really wasn't from the game, it was just from hanging out with friends that I enjoy talking to. The game was just keeping our hands busy while we talked about stuff like it was a podcast. And the microtransactions. Let's not forget the glorious microtransactions. Avengers, spend game. The wave of the future. We'll sell you the car, but you need to pay extra for the tires, windows, and radio. Alright gamers, I've avoided games with microtransactions and in-game economies like the plague for the past 10 years. It just didn't appeal to me, so I wanted to stay as far away from it as possible. And as such, I'm a little behind on the terminology. Believe it or not, Avengers is the first game in quite a while that I've played where I needed to think about any of this stuff. So, I may sound like a blundering idiot trying to break all this down. Bear with me, I'm trying my best here, all I play is horror games and PS2 shit. I'm gonna sound like an old man here. Let's round them up. You can pay money for a thing called a challenge card, also known as a battle pass, which is a big selection of random content you get by leveling up in-game by doing daily and weekly challenges. If you keep playing as much as possible, you'll essentially get all of the money you spent on it back in equal amounts of the game's currency. But you need to play a lot. There's 40 tiers and each one has a different unlockable thingy. You can skip through the tiers by paying a little extra if you really want to unlock that shit quicker without all the repetitive grinding. Everyone has their own Battle Pass challenge card set of levels, and they're all free to start. But for any new characters added to the game in the future, they'll cost $10, even though the character itself will be free. Beyond that, you can buy cosmetic stuff by itself, with some skins costing upwards of $20 USD, with a rotating store that encourages impulse purchases before they're gone. These systems are in place for longevity, so you keep dropping into play every week and the game can remain a service, and a steady flow of income for the developer even after they've sold the base game. Did I get that right? I feel like I get confused easily trying to understand this stuff.
I only receive joy through mutual transaction.
So, the more I buy, the happier you get?
Correct.
And all these weird extra steps and menus and hoops you have to jump through to unlock things is just so hard to keep track of and care about. I shouldn't have to do a bunch of extra research on blog posts like it's a school paper to understand this shit. I don't feel like I'm playing a video game, I feel like I'm trying to play the stock market. Though I've heard that the confusion and complication is intentional so that you'll just lose your patience and start spending money on whatever, and that it's designed to be manipulative. I don't really know about all that. I just know I won't play into it. It sucks that my experience with the game is going to be a little more limited, but I don't want to get roped into buying infinite amounts of currency or impulse buying costumes for peer pressure to look cool. I don't want to play all of these challenges because they just don't really appeal to me. I just don't care about any of that. Plus, a lot of these skins suck anyway, they're just recolors of the same 3 or 4 models. I learned my lesson from Superhero Squad. No one wants to play as Scuba Suit Batman with the flippers and oxygen tank, and no one wants to be a green and purple recolor of Superman. All of these skins are worthless and ugly looking, with a few rare exceptions that actually do look like decent modernized takes on the costumes. Those are cool. More of those, please. I'll play this game, but I don't want to spend a dime on any of this stuff because it just doesn't interest me. In all fairness, though, this game's pretty light on the microtransactions compared to some other stuff that's come out recently, and it could be considerably worse. But it still could be considerably better. I think the practice is still just irritating either way, and I don't want it to become the standard no matter how lightly it's implemented. I have a feeling this was supposed to have loot boxes, but then they scrapped it halfway through development after seeing the Battlefront 2 shitstorm. I don't think microtransactions are inherently evil, and I understand they're a good additional source of income for some developers. I especially understand when they're implemented for like free mobile or indie games, because handing out a free game wouldn't exactly pay the bills for John, the guy who has to model the eyebrows on all the NPCs to pay for his daughter's ballet lessons. But this is a $60 game based on the biggest movie franchise of all time, published by one of the biggest game companies out there. It's been proven 1,000 times over that a $60 game can sell well enough to turn a hefty profit without monetizing the shit out of unlockables. So I have to ask, did this stuff need to be there? Did this need to be a live service game? Couldn't it have just been a fun 4-player co-op game with an emphasis on each character being special individually?
Your differences are your greatest super.
I would have been happy if this was like a 4-man superhero version of A Way Out.
How it feels to chew 5 gum. Stimulate your senses.
There's big, disgusting advertisement costumes and content for Wi-Fi brands, mobile brands, hardware manufacturers, and fucking gum brands. God, remember in Spider-Man when the game had 42 costumes and they were all free? All of these animations of Spider-Man kicking ass didn't need to be purchased or unlocked, he just did them. You didn't need to buy anything or grind a bunch of Chuck E. Cheese tokens to redeem them or send in any cereal box tops. You just had to play all the stuff in the game. You had to find backpacks stuck to shit. Remember how simple that was? All of them were individually rewarding as a collectible because they had a neat backstory that was tied to them. Everyone was having a good time. Can we bring that back? Remember when the product placement was just billboards in the city, so it felt kind of realistic instead of plastered on your childhood hero's ass? I know I'm never touching one of those. I'd feel like Captain Amazing.
Is this your best?
Look, I know a thing or two about having to advertise or plug some products to make your bread. It's perfectly fine, and you can bet the first Mountain Dew I ever drank was just so I could get the Halo experience points out of the bottle cap. Whatever, it's a fact of life like death and taxes if you want to be in the entertainment industry. Art needs a little commerce to exist, but I feel like putting the advertisement on the characters themselves is a step too far, because now it doesn't feel like the game is shilling for a product. It feels like Captain America himself is, and that's gross to me. I don't really appreciate that. No more of that.
New uniforms just showed up. What do you think? What do you have against capitalism?
Keep the branding separate from the characters, at least. I know, there's probably been a million channels out there who have talked about this stuff before in a more intelligent way. Subjects like predatory microtransactions contributing to gambling addictions, the way this stuff is legally dubious, or how it just feels insulting to the customer. I've never really talked about that before because, like I said, I just didn't really touch any games where these things were relevant because it's not my personal interest. I think these practices of monetizing the game as confusingly as possible and pushing in sneaky tactics to trick people into buying things is pretty lame, especially since you just know there are kids playing this game. It's Avengers.
Mommy, may I borrow your wallet? I don't want the silly robot to be sad.
I like short and sweet games with a good story and skill-based single-player games, so maybe this one just isn't for me on that level. And it's unfortunate that my love of superheroes has forced me to be in proximity with this stuff and break my otherwise clean record. If you're cool with games doing this kind of stuff, that's fine too. If you've got the money to spend on it and it's fun for you, then whatever, but it's not my cup of tea. I don't really get any enjoyment out of it. Is that fair? Put the pitchfork down, Timmy! Captain Carlos and Captain Jill are the best Avengers. So what's left that really makes this game not completely worthless? Well, the Avengers themselves, ironically. The story has a few issues, but it more than makes up for that in heart and a clear love of these characters and material. It's weird how many references there are to Avengers and Spider-Man, only for those two to end up not being connected at all. West Coast, AIM, Taskmaster. Nothing? Okay. So, a few years back, the guy in charge of Marvel TV, Ike Perlmutter, who is famously a weirdo racist, said that he wanted to use the X-Men's mutants in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. despite not having the rights. Instead, he used his seniority as a producer to force Marvel Studios to give him the use of the Inhumans to fill the void of a marginalized, superpowered minority group, which could make for quick and convenient introductions for various superpowered characters in the TV shows. You don't have to give everyone a unique origin, just make a big explosion that gives everyone powers. Just like The Flash. Just like Static Shock. Remember The Big Bang? Now he had his own legion of Bang Babies to use in his shows, at the cost of the planned 2018 Inhumans movie. And we all know how that turned out. The comics even briefly adjusted to match this by having a random sample of the population become Inhumans while also killing off as many of the mutants as possible. Gee, tell us what you really think, guys. But hey, at least we got Miss Marvel and Synapse out of it. Seems like this game took some cues from that by having the Terrigen crystal explode at the beginning of the story and turn a lot of random folks into Bang Babies as a quick and easy explanation for tons of superpowered bosses and street thugs. Is it a lazy way to write superhero world building? Am I mad about it? Well, yeah, because they didn't use any of them. Kamala is like the only named recognizable character to get powers out of this, and everyone else is just default white guy NPCs with generic names. You spend the whole game fighting robots instead of people with powers, so that feels like a huge missed opportunity.
We're inhuman. No one cares about us.
And to be honest, I didn't really connect with the Inhumans a lot because we only get to know one of them, and I just default to thinking of her more as the rookie Avenger than part of the Inhumans as a whole. They're more just a plot device than anything.
No one cares about us.
But it serves as a good backstory for why the world is in jeopardy and needs the Avengers to come back. After fumbling a supervillain attack during a public event and doing the superhero equivalent of accidentally saying a slur on Wheel of Fortune, the Avengers disband because they feel like they failed the world and let Captain America die. So they all mope around for 5 years like that movie you saw, no matter who you are, until one day an excited young fan decides to go on a cross-country road trip to get the band back together. This is the plot of The Country Bears. I enjoy the framing of the story a lot, and it was a good idea to make Kamala our window and introduction into this world because she's the most normal and down-to-earth character in the game. She's just a normal kid instead of a genius scientist, billionaire, professional assassin, or time traveler. She's just as much of a fan of these characters as we are, so it's fun seeing her geek out about the references and Easter eggs. It's a smart idea to have all the Avengers meet and introduce themselves to her, because then by proxy we, the players, are getting introduced to this version of the team, since they're all already established. It's like a better version of what they tried to do with MCU Spider-Man. Except Kamala was always an obsessed Avengers fan, so they didn't need to change anything about her to make it work. And it serves a clever purpose in helping to establish the characters more strongly. And I really love these characters. Everyone on the team feels very likable and charming, and I dig the voice cast. I was really worried about Nolan North and Troy Baker being Iron Man and Hulk respectively, but after a while they really grew on me and I stopped hearing those voice actors and just started hearing the characters. I think that's a real testament to their ability as voice actors, and I understand why they're considered the best of the best. The alternative was probably just a bunch of awkward, clunky MCU actor impressions that would have been far more distracting. After the Avengers all decide to pursue other projects and Tony and Bruce start doing separate Let's Play channels, a scientist who was mutated by the Terrigen Mist is now using the evil corporation AIM to take over the world piece by piece and capture all the Inhumans because they're a menace to society and X-Men comics everywhere. Then he's a MODOK. Why does he call himself MODOK? It's never explained, just roll with it.
A lab tech named George comes to work one day, and he gets his head blown up like a whoopee cushion, and then it's fused to a flying toilet. Laughing yet? How about this one? The best evil scheme he ever came up with was figuring out how to wipe himself with his stubby little Tyrannosaurus Rex arms. Eat a bag of you stubby leg.
I liked him better when he was Bruce Campbell. What I don't like about this story is how little it feels like anything happens in the story. You're just going from aim base to aim base, smashing things, and every few hours another Avenger jumps in and joins after a single cutscene of convincing. Then on to destroying more aim bases. You don't really feel like you're going anywhere or exploring the Marvel Universe because all the recognizable landmarks have been turned into the same generic sci-fi levels full of multicolored robots to smash. The environments that you explore are really bland and basic, like forest, desert, snowy forest, snowier forest, like 4 square blocks of a city with nothing in it, etc. This suffers from the same problem as Ultimate Alliance, where you're stuck in metal corridors for a while. But that game had the advantage of occasionally taking you somewhere really cool and special that was like a location from the books. Here, not so much. There's also a pretty gross lack of villains for a game this length, just more robots. A few characters or ideas are just randomly introduced or dropped without a second thought. Boy, it would have really made me care about the plight of the Inhumans if I saw this guy reunited with his mother or whatever, but we'll just forget about that scene. You fight the Watchdogs for like one scene, and then they never talk about him again. Abomination just walks in out of nowhere, appears in one more cutscene after you beat him, then is gone forever. MODOK pulls this giant robot out of nowhere, and Thor is like, "Oh, it's this thing, I know those." Where did it come from? How did he find out about it? Why is it there? What's its purpose? Doesn't matter, shut up. Here's more scenes of the Avengers being fucking cute. The lack of variety isn't helped by how quickly this game ends. The story mode is so short that I have this awful gut feeling that there will be a $40 story DLC to show you how it really ends. Fuck you! But all of these things are negligible because at the very least, the story is an incomprehensible drivel. These linear levels full of scripted events are ironically where I felt the most free in the entire game, because I wasn't worrying about leveling up, or gear, or boosting stats, or finding loot, or cosmetics, or whatever. I was just enjoying the story the game was trying to tell, and feeling connected to these characters and the chemistry they had during their odyssey. These characters really hold it down and make you care. I didn't really give a shit about the Inhumans, but I cared about Miss Marvel, and seeing her interact with the team and develop all these relationships with them as her mentors and friends was really special. Anytime it's a cutscene where these guys are all just standing around talking, it's riveting. They're so well acted and so charismatic. This game really understood the Avengers' individual personalities, and at their core, the team isn't the idealized legion of perfect people the fans see them as. They can be immature, unconfident, self-loathing, distrustful, and a boomer. They're all very flawed and damaged people who just want to do the right thing even when they don't always know how to. And even though they have a hard time getting along at times, it's because they're a family of misfits, but when they work together, they can do anything. Even after everything, I don't feel like this game as a whole was a quick and easy cash grab. Parts of it are very disappointingly greedy or underwhelming, but I feel like at some point down the line, this game was made with a lot of love and passion. These linear levels where you get to explore a character's individual talents and see them interacting with their super pals in a creative and fun set piece, these are the real standouts. Like Captain America and Iron Man escaping an exploding satellite, Miss Marvel running from the Hulk after he thinks she stole Cap's shield, Iron Man exploring around his decaying family home to build a makeshift suit and gear up for action, or the beginning and end of the game where you play as every Avenger as they take on a unique obstacle suited to their skills. Parts like these are where I see this game's untapped potential. This could have been a really amazing single-player experience if the game was more of that stuff, but as it is, it's unfortunately bogged down by things I want to believe the game wasn't originally intended to have. The live service elements and multiplayer elements feel so underdeveloped and tacked on. I've started wondering if they were added later in development and this game was probably meant to be something more linear and toned down. I feel like somewhere down the line, something changed and it lost its identity. But I wasn't part of development, so I can't say for sure. That's just speculation on my part. Buried under all this unnecessary fluff, there was the makings of something special, with the end result being a mixed bag that I think had more potential. And I hope that one day, we do get the game that this one tried to be. Because I have a feeling it came very close to being something great.